Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's webinar brought to you by Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. My name is Mike Kramer. I am the Calibration Program Manager at Perry Johnson, and want to thank you all for logging in. I hope everything is well, or as well as can be expected during this pandemic period that we're all going through right now. Appreciate everybody logging in. As you can see, today's webinar, we're going to center around section 7.9 in ISO IEC 17025-2017, which is the section on complaints. As always, this webinar is being recorded. You can go back and listen to it, or if you want to share it with a colleague that was unable to attend, you can go directly to our webinar and re-listen to this particular webinar, or we have a vast selection of past webinars that we've presented over the last several years. Go directly to our webinar tab, go to past webinars, you can go to the recording. You can also request through our website just the slides from today's webinar. This webinar is should be no longer than 1 hour. As always, you should have a block in your on your screen for typing in questions. At the end of the webinar, I'll go back and review those questions, entertain them, try to answer them. And please try to keep all questions related to today's topic, which is section 7.9 complaints. So for those folks that are transitioning to the 2017 standard, or perhaps you've already transitioned, one thing you will notice in particular with this section, it is a section that's greatly magnified in the 2017 standard. What I have up there is from the 2005 standard. The section on complaints was one section, one clause. So was the old section 4.8. So 17025, 2005, what you see under there, under section 4.8, was the entire section that dealt with complaints. 2017, as I stated, it puts more emphasis on this section. It covers from section 7.9.1 through section 7.9.7. Okay, complaints first enters the 2017 standard. During definition is actually one of the new definitions that has been added. So defined as per 3.2 in the 2017 standard. A complaint is defined as the expression of dissatisfaction of any person or organization to a laboratory relating to the activities or results of that laboratories where a response is expected. So we're going to look at each and every one of these clauses as they're written in the 2017 standard. So what's required? 7.9.1, the laboratory shall have a documented process to receive, evaluate, and make decisions on complaints. So you have to have some sort of documentation telling you how complaints are handled. It states in the standard a documented process. That could be a number of things. It can include anything from a flow chart, swim lane diagrams. You could still utilize standard operating procedures, or could be done manually through Excel, for example. through automated software. I know from doing years of 2005, most often I would see an actual procedure in place for us under the old section 4.8 for complaints. You can still use a documented procedure that can be utilized as your process. You may want to, however, need to revise that procedure to reflect the expanded requirements in the 2017 standard. So 7.9.2, this is now required. A description of the handling process of complaint shall be made available to any interested party on request. Upon request of a complaint, the laboratory shall confirm whether the complaint relates to laboratory activities that it is responsible for, and if so, shall deal with it. The laboratory shall be responsible for all decisions at all levels of the handling process for complaints. So basically, this is new. Basically, it's in the standard. If any interested party, and you have to have a documented process somewhere, would like to see that process that you have in place for complaints, 792 states that that is to be made available to that interested party. Second part there is the lab. So a complaint comes in, of course, if it's directed toward the lab. Perhaps your lab is part of a larger organization. You're a calibration lab in a manufacturer. You're a testing lab within a larger organization. Have to confirm whether or not it relates to laboratory activities. And those complaints that are related to the laboratory of activities, of course, is directed to the lab. Okay, so as an assessor or yourself, if you're doing an internal audit, of course, you shall have a documented process. 793 states the process for handling complaints shall include at least the following elements and methods. So as an assessor or as an internal auditor, of course, you want to see that process, and you want to make sure what we have listed under here, we're going to go into, that these elements are captured in that process, which includes a description of the process for receiving, validating, investigating the complaint, and deciding what actions are to be taken in response to it. If someone calls in with a complaint, the whole process of where does that go? Where is it received? Give an example. Somebody calls with a particular issue with a CAL cert or a test cert. It goes into perhaps the main administrative area. What is the process for receiving it, validating it, investigating, and deciding what actions? Where is it recorded? A complaint comes in, tracking and recording complaints, including actions taken to resolve them. And then C, of course, is ensure that any appropriate action is taken. So in other words, if it's something that can be contained readily, perhaps correct it. And if you are actually a nonconformance against your own policies, procedures, 17025, take it further and institute a formal corrective action. So again, looking at this section, first thing, of course, you're going to have a documented process in place. And you want to make sure, if you look at that process, where these elements are captured under 793. Depicted in front of you right now, these A, B, and C areas. The laboratory receiving the complaint shall be responsible for gathering, verifying all necessary information to validate the complaints. So in other words, the lab needs to assure that the information that it receives from the source of the complaint is accurate. I often say there's perhaps two sides to every story. So you want to assure that the complaint comes in, that you first of all verify all the necessary information, and then of course validate that what was conveyed to you from the complainant. Whenever possible, the laboratory shall acknowledge receipt of the complaint and provide the complainant with a progress report and the outcome. So in other words, the source of the complaint needs to be kept in the loop. Keep them abreast of, well, first of all, perhaps, as I stated before, a complaint comes into an organization, did not directly go to the lab. Perhaps it finds its way to the laboratory manager, which is a call should be made at that point to the complainant, perhaps to verify the initial information that was given, and acknowledge that the laboratory has now got the complaint and is now going to address the complaint. And of course, keeping them in the loop is stated in here under 795, perhaps giving them periodic progress reports and on the investigation, and then finally the outcome of the investigation. This next one under complaints is very interesting. It's been added, 796, and as it's stated here, as depicted directly from the standard, the outcome to be communicated to the complainant shall be made by or reviewed and approved by individuals not involved in the original laboratory activities in questions. So what that is stating there, if an individual, perhaps you're a small lab, a couple individuals are actually performing the testing or calibration, perhaps they're involved directly in producing the report. If the complaint had to do perhaps against the report not being accurate, wrong information depicted, if whoever was involved in producing that report, they need to remove themselves from the process of reviewing and approving any specific corrective action that the laboratory had agreed to in rectifying that particular complaint. So that person needs to remove themselves from that activities. Of course, if you're a large organization, that might be relatively easy to have somebody else look at it. There is a note in the standard, and I see this. I do know I have some small, as an assessor, I do actually have one organization. It's only one person. And it states in there, and a note is additional information, FYI, as documented in 17025. This can be performed by external personnel. Again, that could be somebody without outside the organization. It should be somebody that the lab authorized under section 6.2 in the 2017 standard. Personnel, you have to authorize folks to perform laboratory activities, which is not just the nuts and bolts of doing the testing and calibration. It can also be directed toward this particular note here. If you're going to authorize somebody from outside the organization to review and implement and agree to corrective action. So again, that person should be authorized. And that note, I think, would be much more prevalent for smaller organizations and larger organizations. So again, 796 is not, it's an addition. This was not specified in 2005. It is in 2017. So from sort of reviewing a complaint, I see it was directed at a certain individual, and I saw that individual was directly involved in implementing and approving the corrective action. That would be not allowed under 7.926. Okay, we're already getting to the end of this section here on complaints. 7.9.7. Whenever possible, the laboratory shall give formal notice of the end of the complaint handling to the complainant. So that is when the corrective action has been taken, has been agreed to. At that point, it's just not leave the complainant out there hanging. You need to inform them of the results of the investigation. As per 796, a formal notice of the end of the complaint handling to the complainant. Have a note here about confidentiality. I know, oftentimes you might get a complaint or a person wants to remain anonymous. So, not specifically stated in 7.9 under complaints. Section 4.2 under the 2017 is confidentiality. That's all laboratory activities. So if anybody with issues a complaint, unless they agree to having their names divulged, that is to come under the realm of 4.2 under confidentiality. Okay, this was a relatively short webinar. This is actually the end of the webinar. Let me see. I was having some difficulty with this prior to signing on, seeing if I have any questions, if anything has come up. Here we go. I have one person here that says they cannot hear anything. I got the message that I can be here now. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, give me a second. Sometimes it takes a minute for these to repopulate itself. These questions. I'll go right to the source here for the one question I do have in. Question. It's starting to populate itself now. Any guidance on what is a complaint? As defined, best I can, as far as defining it, you may have missed the first part of this presentation, but that is the definition of a complaint. What we have went through over the first part of the webinar. Definition of a complaint is any dissatisfaction by a person or organization to a laboratory relating to activities or results of that laboratory where a response is expected. With regards to confidentiality, is this about the client or laboratory information? This would be in regards to, particularly, in this particular section, we're talking about the person issuing the complaint. Under confidentiality, it's also any information obtained by outside sources, such as, for example, subcontractors. So as far as confidentiality in regards to complaint, section 4.2 in the standard, it would be if I'm reading this question correctly, it's the person who issues a complaint. If that person wants to remain anonymous, if it happens to have been a client of your laboratory, then that would be confidential information unless that person agrees to not remaining anonymous. I hope I answered the question as it was being asked there. And as far as the laboratory, any information that's not um, that you do for your customers, that's just confidential between you and the laboratory. You're not divulge any of that information to a third-party source unless that client agrees to it. Three two activities is pretty vague. Any other guidance? Like I said, if you're a lab by itself, if that's your business, if you're a calibration lab, or if you're a testing lab, and there's no other, you're not part of a larger organization, as I stated before, perhaps a calibration lab within a manufacturer, then any complaints is going to be related to the laboratory activities. So laboratory activities would have anything directly related to the testing or calibration, or anything pertaining to 17025, and also things if it happens to be quality related, such as anything that encompasses the quality management system, your compliant 17025, 2017 compliant quality management system, anything related to that, including the testing or calibration lab activities, would be considered laboratory activities. I'm starting to get some questions in. Sometimes it takes a little while for my area to populate itself. How do you handle complaints via survey, but they do not provide any contact information? Well, as far as if you have no idea who did the survey, as far as reaching out to the individual and just verifying the information, also letting them know when you've did the completed the investigation and the result, the corrective action that was taken. And of course, those sections would be NA in this particular instance. I would say if it does come through in the form of a survey, that you do turn the keys and you do run it through your complaint process. Run it through those A, B's, and C's that are captured within the process, and assuring that all these requirements are being met. And if need be, take appropriate corrective action. Of course, you should verify the information and validate any information that was left on the survey, see if it is true and accurate. That was perfect. Would customers be informed of the ability of the complainants, or I'm trying to The question here, would customers be informed of the ability of the file complainants, or is this an internal response? I'm not sure if you're what you're referring to exactly there. If it anybody can request, of course, any interested party a copy of your complaint handling process. Whoever instituted the complaint, that individual or perhaps the organization, they need to be conveyed to them the results of the investigation. So it's not just an internal response. It should be between your organization and the complainant's organization. Whether you how you distribute it internally, that would be a separate matter. But you need to convey to the external source that issued the complaint the corrective action and what the investigate. If the corrective action was necessary, it may not be. It may just be correction. I always give the example of perhaps say right after right after the new year, folks were still putting 2019 instead of 2020 on the report. Of course, you get some calls. You can simply correct that. That would be where you just correct the situation at hand, amend the report, put the correct date on it. That's not going to assure that it doesn't happen again. In that case, you may have to take it further and implement some sort of a corrective action. Perhaps it was a software issue. Something hasn't been updated in the software. So there's a difference between correction. A complaint may just warrant correction. Just fix the situation at hand is something that, maybe a one-time thing. It wasn't really the lab not following its own protocol. A complaint, they don't like the copy of your letterhead. Somebody can call and complain that. That's not really a valid type complaint where you're going to formally institute a sort of a corrective action. All right, let's see what else we got here. Okay, that seems to be about it for the questions. Not seeing any more coming through here. This webinar was relatively short, but we did cover a lot of ground, as you can see, if anything, how expanded it is. If you're just transitioning from 2005 to 2017. Before I let you go, or you log off, just want to go ahead and announce next month's webinar. Hopefully, everybody will be back in their workplace. If you're not at your workplace because of this pandemic, and things will be back to normal, we can all keep our fingers crossed about that. We do have next month's webinar set up. It's going to be the 20th of April, which is a Monday. And what we're going to look at is, of course, we're getting down to the finish line here as far as a transition to 2017 from 2005. We're going to look at the requirements under document control and control of records, which is actually divided into two parts now, technical and quality related records. So again, mark your calendars, Monday, April 20th. One other thing, on our website right now, particularly if you're a lab that's just beginning to get involved in the accreditation process, you may be in the loop of getting your initial assessment. Great news, we have a webinar coming up. All the information about this webinar you can get on our website, but this webinar is particularly directed at first timers, first time of going through the accreditation process, going through your first assessment, things that you could be looking to expect. What will the assessor be looking at? What type of information are you going to need to be provided to the assessor and the PJLA in front? This will be joined by Tracy Sorensen, who's the president and operations manager of PJLA. who will help you answer questions as you prepare for your initial assessment. So again, for additional information on this webinar to go to and also register, go to our website at www.pjlabs.com. All right, thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing everybody else on seeing you back here on April 20th. And for those that may find this March 25th, mark your calendar for that coming up here shortly. Webinar scheduled for March 25th, 2 to 3 p.m. Thank you.